Thank you. All right. First up, well, only item on the agenda tonight, COVID discussion. So I think you have something prepared, Dr. Kane.
We do actually. I want to thank the board, thank the community as well for its interest clearly in this topic. So, if we could pull up the PowerPoint. So that's clearly the title slide. Before I dive in, there have been a number of emails clearly on this topic that's of high interest. There's been no question. There's been a considerable number of emails on both sides of the issue. At least someone on cabinet has attempted to respond to a very good chunk, if not all, of these email messages. We understand that there's interest in this, and that's why we're having this conversation in open. So I just wanted to make that statement before we got up and going. So next slide, please. That should look very familiar. That primary objective has been the goal since June 2nd of 2021, actually, is to really have as normal school operations as we possibly can, and to provide 5 days a week of high quality instruction and education, in this case, for our students, and to effectively address school needs as they present themselves. There is rumor floating around, and I've seen email that's stating we're looking to go virtual. We have not had any conversation about switching to a virtual format. That has not been a part of any of our thinking and problem solving at this particular point in time. So we are encountering some issues, and we're going to address not only what we are seeing, but we're going to provide some specific data to help people understand, specifically the Board of Education, what we are trying to work our way through. So the next slide provides context in terms of, this is from the County Health Department's webpage, and you can see on the far right of the screen, you can see where we happen to be on that line in purple as a school district. You can see what the data is telling us. There is a lot of positive test rate data that's happening here in the Wentzville School District. We are definitely on the upswing, no doubt about that. Couple of issues. We have students clearly, right? But we also have staffing issues. So next slide, please. You can see what is happening in terms of combined absences. And when we're saying combined, that means all employee groups and also with fill rate, right? If you look at the very bottom of the slide, you can see where we were back in fall of 2020, and you can see what the fill rates look like at that particular point in time. You really want your fill rates well above 70%, which means if a substitute is called, that position is in fact going to be filled. You really want your sub rates well into the 70s, if not the 80s. If you look at the very top of the slide, you can see that that is for today, January 10th, 2020, and you can see what our fill rate looks like, 43.2%. So not only are we having staff members that are out for a variety of reasons, including positivity, but you can see what is happening as it relates to our fill rate as well. It's creating holes that is literally leading to us having to find and create ways to keep doors open. We have flat out told our building administration and our department leads to combine classrooms, to collapse sections, to look at seminar models, to support teachers teaching on plan times, whatever it takes to keep our classroom doors. That's not what we're talking about doing. That's what's been happening. That's already in place at this particular point in time. So just want everyone to understand when we talk about the intensity in terms of numbers of what we're seeing, and you can see how high those numbers happen to be across the district, it's leading to interruptions and it's leading to us having holes that have to be addressed and have to be filled. Dr. LeBrat, you want to address the next slide and then I'll pick back up.
Good evening. On the next slide, we have a positivity progression, just so that you can kind of trace what's been happening over the last 3 school days. We have Thursday afternoon 1-6, Friday afternoon 1-7, and Monday afternoon 1-10, just showing and highlighting the buildings in descending order of highest positivity to lowest. Looking kind of, once we hit a little bit over 1.5 is once we start getting pretty concerned about a building. If we can keep a building below 2, that's good news. Once a building goes above 2, typically it trends upward for quite some time without mitigation efforts. As you can see, we had 4 buildings on Thursday afternoon above 2%. By Friday afternoon, we had 5 buildings above 2%, 3 above 3%, and 1 above 4%. And by Monday afternoon, that was this afternoon at 3 p.m., we had 1 building at 5%, 2 buildings at 4%, 4 buildings at 3%, and I believe 6 buildings at 2% or above, with several knocking on the door in the high ones. So that's our progression over the last 3 school days. Our district positivity has also surpassed 3% as well, which we have not seen yet this year or last.
And when we're talking positivity, now we are talking positivity. This is not about quarantining. This is not about proximity. These are positives, right? These are positive cases that we're dealing with. Next slide.
And the percentages only encompass student positivity.
Right.
I do have staff positivity listed there, but the percentages are based on student population alone.
So our next slide provides a comparison of January 21 compared to January of 2022. Just side by side, day by day comparison in terms of what we are seeing in our first 6 days back from break last year compared to this year as well. You can see how busy and how active just today has been. That number jumped over the course of the day, being today, Monday, January 10th, in terms of how high that number in fact is going. We aren't talking again about presumed positives or quarantines. Again, these are positives that we are drawing comparisons for. So we want you to see day by day what is happening, what trend is clearly in place, and what appears to be happening. I do want to say that the science and what we are hearing is pretty clear that for the next 3 to 4 weeks, we are going to encounter some significant challenges. There's definitely help that appears to be on the way after the next 3 to 4 weeks, but for the next 3 to 4 weeks, we are going to have some tough sledding, so to speak, when it comes to what we're going to see as it relates to positivity. Dr. LeBrat?
You will notice that our total after the first 6 school days of this January is 4.1 times the total of our positivity of the first 6 school days of last January. You'll also notice, I know that Tuesday the 5th, if you look on January 2021, was our highest date of positivity for the entire 2021 school year, closely followed by Monday the 4th, which was 33 students positive. You can see that we have well surpassed that in January of 22, with today being our highest total over the last 2 years at 150 student positives reported today. That's the number we were able to log today. I can let you know that there are additional ones that have not yet been processed as we speak. So we're looking at 4.1 times the number of positives that we had last year, and comparing the same way, collecting and reporting our data the same way, apples to apples comparison. And just this is another way to look at that infographic is the year-to-year student positivity comparison. This on the left-hand side is the first 6 school days of January 2021 compared to the first 6 school days of January 2022. Again, we were collecting data in the same manner. I guess I could say in 2021, we were also collaborating and collecting probable cases. So in fact, they may have actually had a few added in last year that we would not have accounted for this year since we are not tracing and deeming any probables. So if anything is different in the data collection, last year would be higher than this year would have been considering their circumstances. But again, pretty much apples to apples comparison. And one more chart just to kind of give you an idea of where we are, where we've been over the last 18 months in our positivity. If you look at the blue graph or the blue bar, that is our full 2021 school year. August 2020, when we first returned from COVID shutdown, to June of 2021. So last year's full school year, we had 1,153 student positives reported. That also includes students who were probable. This year, before break, that's August 24th through December 21st. So this school year is in green. We've had 1,013 positives. That was before break. In yellow, you'll see that we've had 530 positives since we've returned from winter break. So January 3rd through January 10th, that is 6 days, we've had 530 positives. And in the orange, you'll see on the far right-hand side is today alone. That's 150. So you can quickly see how the last 6 days and today stack up against our totals for the first part of this year through break and in comparison to last year. Just to break that down for you in numbers, the 6 days in yellow is 46% of all of last school year. It is also 52.3% of the first portion of this school year. If you look at today's number, 150 in orange, today's number is 13% of all positives last school year and is 14.8% of all positives that we had before winter break.
So consequently, what does this mean in terms of next steps for us as a district? Step one would be as it relates to mitigation, specifically when it comes to visitors and to our in-person meetings. We go ahead and postpone that. We pause that. And that's something that come back for consideration at the February regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting in terms of freezing that pause. But for now, we need to do something to slow down the number of bodies that are potentially in and out of our buildings. Again, keeping a focus on instruction, keeping teachers, keeping other staff members, keeping students up and going so that we're able to continue the learning process in our buildings. The second half would be this. It's a bit of a tiered or a stepped model that we would be putting in place. For buildings, we're not talking a district, but for buildings, again, for school buildings where there's 3% positivity, we would mask up. And then at 4% positivity starting on February 11th. Again, once this wave comes and begins to descend, we then would revert to a 4% positivity threshold to put masks on in buildings. But prior to that, at 3%, putting masks on once buildings in fact reach that particular point. As Dr. LeBrot shared, once a building sees that it's at 2%, things are definitely on the go to the point where everything's being threatened at that particular point in time. Again, masks become optional once positivity is, as listed on the slide, at or below 1.5% for 3 consecutive days. This is a bit of a pickup of what was stated in our December meeting when it came to mitigation measures in terms of next steps that we need to put in place so that we can abate what is happening within our schools. It was theoretical at that particular point in time. It is real right now. And so as the board said, there was a willingness to come back and have a conversation, and that's why we're seated in these seats on January 10th, because we now have the numbers, we're staring at our reality, and we have to make some steps to move forward. That's the close of the PowerPoint.
All right. At this time, I'll open it up to the board for questions and discussion.
So as we're doing the comparison then between last year and this year, it's my understanding that this Omicron is relatively recent. So we're not really comparing like a COVID situation, which was more dire for adults, but we're talking now. I mean,
Excuse me,
I
Sandy.
had
Please no clapping as well. We have to hear each other, and I understand you guys are excited about what people say or mad on what people say, but we have to have silence so we can hear each other.
so having family members that were sick over the Christmas holidays myself, that I didn't have any other time after COVID started. So I'm looking at a situation where they were only sick a couple of days, very quick. And then they were all back in line with their jobs and whatever, and the kids all back in school. So I guess, you know, when I look at a COVID from 2021, which is what we had been addressing all through the year anyway, and now we have something that is a lot less, and kind of some of the things that I am hearing, and I'm sure that I'm not the only person that's hearing it, but they're expecting this to probably bring an end to COVID. This will create the herd immunity, and it's kind of predicted from what I've been watching as well and hearing that we might have to tolerate this whole situation for maybe a couple of more weeks, not till the end of February. That's kind of what I'm seeing. But So I'm just kind of concerned that, you know, we've got to compare the apples to the apples. So we're not, I mean, I realize that we had less last year. And, but according to this particular virus, from what I'm reading and hearing, is that it is more contagious, but is less creating of illness. You'll get like a flu. You might have a fever a couple of days, you might even have a cough. So, and I understand, however, that we cannot run the school without people in it. So I get that part, and we have to accommodate that.
And say, Dr. King, can you kind of speak to, because you and I talked a little bit, some of the things that you've tried to solution through, you know, before bringing this to us? Because I know really the root of the issue is not really the severity of the virus, you know, and people being sick, but really trying to keep the doors open, which is a commitment that we made, and having the staff to do so.
So I want my comments about substitutes to not come across in a disparaging manner by any stretch. That is not the intent. But we have teachers and students that are assigned and paired with each other because ideally that's what we're looking to do on a daily basis, is provide the instructional environment where our students are learning from their teacher of record. And that teacher of record is the staff member that best knows that student, right? Their capabilities, areas of improvement, areas of strength. That's what we're looking to do, is maximize that opportunity each and every time we open our school doors. Our challenge is we can't keep staff in front of students. So we are literally having buildings every day figure out and problem solve how to keep an adult in front of students on a daily basis. Sometimes that is staff members from district and other offices. Sometimes it's assistant principals and principals that are going in, just keeping our doors up and going so that we can, in fact, keep students learning. It is what is necessary right now, and folks are not complaining. I want that very clear. People are demonstrating their professionalism and dedication as students on a daily basis because of what they're doing right now. But we need to get back to the ideal as most quickly as we possibly can. For now, we're going to have to work through this. It's not ideal, but it does create this solution and this problem solving on a daily basis to keep our doors open. It's what we need to do, and we recognize that. We want to get back to the ideal. I'm hoping that, as I said, and that's why you see February 11th, right? There's some faith that I'm walking on when it comes to the 11th, right? That things will subside or begin to subside by then. But we need to do something now so that we can make it to that point. I don't want to call this Board of Education for a meeting because we have numbers that are 2 or 3 times as significant as what we're seeing right now. And it's a really, truly dire situation. We still have time to be proactive if you act now so that we can do something to keep those doors open.
So my question kind of goes back to one that we've kind of talked about before. And there's a lot of information that's out there relative to masking. Both the pros and the cons, and the situation of how masks affect the the psychology and the well-being of a child. Far more than if they get a flu. And if they get a flu, then they have herd immunity. Then they have immunity from this one. That's what we're being told by the doctors. So I guess I'm saying that, how effective and what source would you have to say that masking up is going to be something that is going to have to be done? Because I know that there's an awful lot of children that are literally having some difficulty with that now. They went through all of last year with masking pretty much in the day.
If I may.
And I don't necessarily know that that's, I think that there have been some issues relative to that, social and emotional development from that. Stopping to think about the fact that just our kindergartners, they haven't even seen their teacher's face. And that I think is very sad.
Dr. LeBron, did you have something?
Yes, Director Garber, I'll try to answer your question to the best of my ability. In regard to masking and knowing if the data is proving that it works. If we look back at Dwello earlier this year and even at Prairie View just a couple months ago, we do know that when we instituted mask, I believe Dwello is at 2%, and I believe Prairie View is when our threshold was maybe 3.5, a little bit higher. We do know that within some short time, and actually it was the lower we implemented the mask, the quicker the issue resolved itself. So within Dwello, we saw significant reduction in cases within just a few days. Prairie View, we saw it within a couple of weeks. And that's why our threshold is at 3%. And only until we can keep that number at 1.5% for 3 consecutive days. Once we can hit 1.5% for 3 consecutive days, we feel pretty confident that we can keep it under that number. As I mentioned earlier, 1.5 is kind of that threshold. Once we get up to 2%, we have significant concerns and it continues to rise. But if we can keep it in that 1.5 range, we feel pretty safe and confident that we can keep numbers down and prevent them from rising. So Dwello at 2% and Prairie View at 3.5 were both examples of where we instituted a masking threshold and they were successful very quickly.
I would like to say that, and I'm not going to argue the fact, but that was before this new variance took place. And they're saying that this new variance is just running rampant. We're not going to stop it. We're not going to stop it with cloth masks. They're asking for the N95 mask to be worn. But this new variance is running through everyone. And I feel as if keeping visitors out of the school and putting masks on, I just don't think it's going to stop it. I think we just need to let it play its course and do the best we can on keeping these doors open.
I don't know if stopping is possible, but I do believe that slowing down is something that we can at least make an attempt at. There's a reason that other districts are doing this. Like ideally, we've already seen, right? Dwello was the most dire situation that we had. Hands down, the most dire situation that we had. And the mask absolutely did turn the tide, as Dr. LeBron is expressing. And so if we go unchecked, the numbers are going to completely continue to grow. Putting a mitigative series of steps in place, I don't think it can stop. I don't think that's fair to state that it's going to stop. But at an absolute minimum, slowing things down buys us some time to get to that point where this is behind us and no longer in front of us.
Is it behind us or are we delaying it? That's kind of the point that I have with it.
President Bates. So here's where I am with the masking. So what I'm hearing from the administration is they want to try to slow down the rate of infection in our schools, and I think everybody here can appreciate that. But I am trying my best to compare apples to apples. I know that's like the word or phrase of the day, right? The evening. So what I did is I went to the St. Louis County area and I compared school districts there that have had universal masking since the 2020 reopening of schools. I'm going to go ahead and compare Hazelwood because they're the most comparable to us. Wentzville has 2,700 staff. Hazelwood has 2,942 staff. I'm going to compare Friday's numbers because the other district doesn't have their Monday numbers updated. So as of Friday in the WSD, we had 47 staff out, which is 1.8%. In Hazelwood, they had 162 staff out, which is 5.5%. They have 2,942 staff employed. They have every single mitigation in place. They have a vaccination mandate for staff. If they choose not to do that, they have weekly testing, COVID tests. They have social distancing. They have no visitors in the building. They have cleaning. They have, like I said, universal masking. So I just think we really need to be clear and upfront with our patrons and our public that we don't know if this board, if it's the will of the board to mask in any capacity, we don't know that even slowing it down is going to help. I'm sure Hazelwood's numbers increased. I also have Parkways, which is pretty comparable. They're in the same position. They have 3,053 staff, 4.2% out as of Friday. So I think everybody is in the same situation, and so that is my concern too. And I just don't know that I can vote in favor for those mitigations. That's potentially, well, it's not potentially, it will further hinder learning. It will further hinder teaching, and it will further hinder the educational experience that we all want to value. So I understand that we need to keep the doors open, but I don't know, as much as we both want to work together and try, that that is going to be the solution for us.
President Bates, if I may, I think the sentiment that I hear, and I think it's been largely consistent this year, is that the mitigation strategies as shown here is something that this board doesn't necessarily believe is going to move that needle, and certainly the dynamic has changed as it relates to this variant. I guess the question that I have for you, Dr. Kane, is if that's the case, and that's where this board leans, what other things outside of mitigation strategies? I know you listed kind of the call it the air cover you've given buildings to be creative and solutions. What other things can be put in front of this board? Whether it's sub-rate pays to change that dynamic of fill rate, or other things that are outside of mitigation strategies that may or may not, we can argue that, move the needle to keep buildings open, because I think certainly that's going to be this board's goal, is to see schools stay open, but recognizing you need adults to do that. And so maybe my question is very, very pointedly, what are other things besides mitigation strategies, putting that to the side for a second, that this board can approve, can agree on, that would provide some level of solutioning towards that goal?
So sub-rate pay is a conversation that we could have in a different setting as it relates to pay. I can tell you that there are districts that aren't experiencing the same crunch when it comes to sub. I am not going to say that I know of a single district that sits there and has 100% fill rate when it comes to subs, right? You can make some assumptions that maybe there are other factors that lead to people subbing elsewhere. Maybe there are districts that actually have thresholds in place where substitutes are feeling comfortable coming in to actually do that work as it relates to subbing. We don't have any mitigation strategies in place. We don't have any measures in place. With the exception of cleaning spaces in the manner in which we're cleaning spaces, we don't have additional steps that are in place. So what I flat out told buildings is that they have the green light to be as creative, right, in terms of doing what they can do to keep doors open. We've actually been brainstorming. We spent this morning brainstorming grade span by grade span with our building leaders that are waking up every day facing this challenge and doing their level best to go above and beyond to keep doors open, to see what we could glean as it relates to ideas as well. And so we aren't doing this alone in terms of cabinet, right? We're trying to not only learn from our building leaders, we're trying to learn what's happening elsewhere in the region, right? If there are ideas that we can glean, that we can copy and paste and use in the district, we're more than happy to do so in considering them. But I will tell you, mitigation is absolutely a part of the puzzle that keeps it all together. We just aren't using those puzzle pieces at this particular point in time.
Can you walk us through what are how you're cleaning these schools right now? And I guess back to, I've heard in 2020, 21, we were cleaning a lot and we kind of stepped away from that. Is that true? And do you think, what would it take for us to, I guess, get more involved in deep cleaning some of these
Sure.
schools that are getting out of control?
So I will address a bit of that, and I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Angevine as well. The science, and Director Garber mentioned this, right? What we know about the coronavirus continues to evolve, right? So when we were spending time literally augmenting our schedules, right, adding more time for classes, in between classes, teachers to actually be cleaning desks themselves, well, that's not where we were finding infection actually occurring. So there's a reason that we stepped away from that. We are still cleaning buses on a regular basis. We are going through buildings and having some deep cleaning that's occurring on a regular basis there as well. And then there are places within school buildings, nurse's office, for example, where we're cleaning on a daily basis. Much like teachers, I mean, you name it, every employee group, right? We're experiencing challenges as it relates to staffing. We're also seeing it with our maintenance and our custodial staff as well. Mr. Angevine, you want to speak to that?
Yes, a couple comments on that is as COVID has hit, we very much increased our cleaning abilities. We now have fogging machines, which we didn't even, well, we only had a few before COVID. Since COVID hit, we've stepped up. We've got fogging machines. We fog select portions of every school on a nightly basis. We fog every school on a weekly basis. We have picked up our chemicals. We've changed our chemicals over to chemicals that work better. We have just come across in November a new fogging technique and new fogging materials that last much longer. We're always in the process of cleaning more and more as much as we can and doing a better process with it. Our problem right now is enough cleaning staff. Our cleaning staff are reduced. We're having trouble obtaining cleaning staff, not just because of COVID, but also because just the hiring process in general for cleaning staff is very hard to do. The problem we're having isn't that we've slacked up on cleaning. It's doing everything we can to have as many custodians as we have cover as much space as possible. It's just hard right now with lack of staff trying to keep everything clean, but there's a lot of overtime and a lot of work going on the custodians that are still here.
President Bates, if I could, please. I had asked earlier today if you could tell me what our attendance is by elementary, middle school, and high school. Do you have any thoughts what them numbers were, percentage-wise of attendance?
Overall, as a district, today we were just south of 87%, and on Friday we had a very similar attendance rate. Typically, we would be well above 90% on an average day.
Once again, do you have any numbers on elementary, middle, and high school?
I don't have them broken out. I just had the district totals. I can get those to you, though.
Thank you.
President Bates, if I may, can I just ask a clarifying question on the data specific in the dashboard? It looks like it ties, Dr. Labrat, like the 530, which is a cumulative run of the 6 days. That's in the positivity percentages that we see in the purple, red, yellow, green. Is that accurate? Like, we haven't said differently. We haven't peeled back any case at this point that we've been reported off of the dashboard. So is it fair to say that the students that reported COVID positive, the 82 students on Monday, that those students are back in the classroom today?
It would be fair to say that some of them, yes, could be back in the classroom, but since we are not discerning whether they return on day 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it would be much more difficult to keep track of each day that the student is returning or whether or not they bounce back and forth on day 6 through 10, depending on how they're feeling. We're going to continue counting that 10-day of positivity window because a student is still deemed positive during that time, 5 days where they isolate at home, and then 5 days where they return with a mask. So I guess just for consistency purposes, yes, some of them could be back in the classroom, but some could still be at home.
Okay, and just to kind of further that, so I'm not necessarily, I think Director Stoley made some quotes of other districts, and if you look at the data across either St. Louis County or St. Charles County, prevalence rates per thousand, are at all-time highs. So I don't think these numbers should be too unexpected. And putting in, mitigation strategies at thresholds on positives that I would argue largely came from behaviors on New Year's Eve, during the holiday break, et cetera, it doesn't seem to be representation of whether or not there's actual spread within the school at this point. We're only 6 days into the school, and, incubation periods and contact dates in terms of when you come in contact and when you'd expect to be positive. This seems to be a fallout from the holidays largely. Now we're obviously 6 days, not 3. So my view is, this is almost an expected set of data points given prevalence rates in the county are pushing 20 per 1,000 or 10, 1,000 for example. I just have my views are is that that's not representing of spread in schools, what's happening within the buildings, et cetera. We won't see that for another week to two.
I would agree with you that the first couple of days, absolutely, there's a bit of a bubble there, particularly from the holiday break and New Year's in general. But I do know that that incubation period has decreased significantly with Omicron, and we're looking at a 2 to 5 day incubation period. So the numbers that we're getting right now, and again, I'm not sure, Dr. Skeeters, if you could bring up the blue to green, there you go, that one. One more, there you go. If you look, we saw a significant dip on Wednesday and Thursday. Last year, the the third and fourth days back, we did see a bit of that dip again this year. Even though it was still larger numbers, we saw the dip again, but we increased again significantly on Friday to 71 and today to 150. And if we're looking at a 2 to 5 day incubation period, you're looking at kids back together on Monday and Tuesday, 2 to 5 days, and you're looking at Friday and Monday are already ramping up again pretty significantly. And so I do feel like you're exactly right on Monday and Tuesday of last week. I think some of that is bubble over from the break, but I do believe that Friday and Monday, last Friday and this Monday, are indicative of a quicker incubation period and transmissibility at school.
Yeah, I don't disagree with probably the sentiments in terms of timing, whether it's, from at home or at school. Yes, I would agree. The change.
Question, historically, we've had like a flu or some sort of bug outbreak, we have closed the building, for a day and done like a deep clean. We have a 4-day break coming up. Would it behoove us to tack on an additional day and, make sure all the buildings are deep cleaned? Or do we think that could potentially provide us, any benefit or relief? Because at the end of that, then some of these numbers, they'll have cleared that 5-day window.
So this upcoming week, we have semester exams for high school students, and I want them to know I am raining on the parade of any idea of bringing clothes to that semester exam before they're able to take it, right? All jokes aside, I think if we're looking at that, we want to give our community, right? Because their childcare, an abundance of childcare challenges that are presented. If you tell me on a Monday evening going into Tuesday that Friday I don't have childcare, I think we need to provide more runway for people to be able to make the plans and to make the plans that they need to ultimately do that. Given an extended weekend, there's ample time for things to calm down. We kind of learned that over the past 2.5 years as well, is what happens over the course of the weekend in terms of things literally calming down within buildings themselves.
So I have a few things I wanted to bring up. You were talking about subs earlier, Dr. Kane, and subs are fabulous. Talking about sub pay is great, but when you have learning, everyone's talking about learning and learning loss. And if you have a class that has a sub for a week or 2 weeks, that's not the kind of learning that the community expects. So that's not going to fix that problem. Maybe it would bring more people in, more warm bodies, but it's not actually the same. If you have an AP English course, the substitute's not going to be able to teach it the same way that the normal teacher would. I'm not done. I also wanted to know, Dr. Kane has made it clear what his recommendation is, and I'd like to know from each individual board member why they choose specifically to not follow that.
So I think we all realize having a teacher in the classroom is the best thing, but we're not trying to fix a problem. We're trying to deal with what we have going on in the district, and it's not going to be the ultimate fix, but we're limping by. So we're trying to do what we can to keep these doors open. And per Shannon's information she just gave us, it's clear that masking is not working. Mitigation levels, keeping people out of schools, is not working. So I mean, we're trying to do what we can to keep these doors open without throwing in things that aren't working.
But I think that the person, Dr. Kane, who we've hired to manage the district, has the expertise and has shared that with us. So again, I ask each board member why you choose not to follow the recommendation.
President Bates, if I may. So Director Abbott, I appreciate the question. I hope that you can appreciate that I did bring some data based upon where my perspective is. I also know that just in, keeping up on the news, like I'm sure most of us have, that DESE had announced that it's trying to appeal to the Missouri State Board of Education. And the reason for them doing that is to add more AMI days. They're considering that on Tuesday for
I'm
the
aware of that.
meeting. So, and what they attribute that change, that request is that masking is not working in school districts that have a masking mandate. It's that exact very reason. So now I have provided 2 examples for where I am and what my concerns are.
I was talking about the full recommendation. I didn't say anything about masking specifically.
I understand that, but masking is one part of mitigation. So we're talking about
I'm going to call for a recess, please.
All right. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Come back.
Actually, President Bates, real quick, do we need a roll call, or is that Director Abbott? Is that if anyone objects?
Is that a
If
motion?
anyone does not object, I would like to call for a recess.
I object.
All right. We'll take a 5-minute recess.